Hey, and welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera. This episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at props.cash. You can get 25% off your first month with promo code Dellera25, and that's going to get you the All Sport Pass. You're going to be able to get all that NBA content. You're going to be able to filter out playoffs versus regular season and be able to look into some of these matchups, some of the projections, and how players do with and without players, and how they do in extended minutes. And you can get all of that in one tool at props.cash. Additionally, they have other sports as well. You know, it's the height of baseball season. We're about to get started. We're about to get into those dog days of summer, and you're going to be able to get all of that hit rate data and some of the advanced metrics that they have at props.cash for the MLB season or for the W. The W's in the preseason right now, and you can get all of this all for the same package, and you can get it all for 25% off your first month with promo code Dellera25. Guys, it's good to be back, back in the saddle. It is early right now on Wednesday morning. My son was up. It has been a whirlwind. I'm a little tired. My eyes are a little bit heavier right now, but we had to get this content out for you guys. It's really important to continue to do the work that we're doing here. Just gave my son a bottle, and he's back to sleep. And we're just going to continue to keep crushing it. So it's been a really exciting time during the playoffs right now, and it's funny because he doesn't sleep. So I've actually been I've been watching somehow more games, I think, right now, because I'm just spending a little bit more time holding him. He's good, mom's good, so those are the most important things. But I am able to kind of enjoy a little bit of my time, with my son, and we're watching some of these games together. I'm probably doing a little bit more watching than he is, but at the same time, we are able to kind of consume the content. So even though I think my volume in terms of putting things out has been a little bit lesser, it definitely hasn't changed. If anything, I've watched probably a little bit more of these games just based on the fact that he's up. I'm watching like replays on TNT with the commercials still, because I'm just sitting there in the recliner watching the games while we're trying to get him to sleep, or while he is sleeping. So it has been a pretty good time, and I did want to touch on a couple things, because the Knicks, this is awesome. Great first round win for us. That was something I was talking to my wife about. I was like, we're undefeated when Luca watches these games, so we're gonna have to watch these games together. So it's been quite the time. The Knicks, it's very exciting, obviously, and we'll kind of dive into some of the implications of what just happened with the obviously in the series win against 76ers, but in game one against the Knicks and the Pacers. I'd like to talk about that. We'll kind of get into some of the nitty gritty there, some of the film, and talk about my best bets there. Additionally, I'll give a couple player props for the remaining the rest of the series. And we will look to see if there's any positions that we can add in the series player prop, like leader market or the assist per game, that type of thing. I'll touch on each of the remaining series and, just kind of what we're looking for moving forward. But before I got into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about betting on props based on prior game data in the playoffs. Obviously, I use it. A lot of people use it. It is relevant. The one thing that I will say, and I kind of hesitate to, recommend, right, is I know one of the things that we can do with props.cash lets you do it too. And you can change the filters, right? And you can say all right, well, I'm going to play, let me see, how does this guy perform with 30 minutes a game or something like that? And the hit rate changes, and the hit rate's this, hit rate's that. That all matters, right? That's all important. However, I think that you kind of need to be a little careful with that, because the situation is dramatically different. A lot of times, these guys, let's talk about a Hartenstein, right? So Hartenstein, he plays 35 minutes a game right now, especially with the Mitchell Robinson injury. He's probably going to continue to play 35 minutes a game. Maybe we'll even see a little bit more than that. But let's say he's even at 30, and you're all right, I want to filter the minutes to where he's playing 30 or more. Before the Robinson injury, it was really hard to kind of cap for that, because you'd be saying all right, well, when he plays 30 minutes and with Mitchell Robinson, he does X, Y, and Z. it doesn't like really take into account the fact that the Knicks rotations, maybe they change that day, maybe they change that game, maybe they do want to run Mitchell Robinson a little bit more just based on the availability. So you kind of are like skewing the data in a way where it's favorable to you to kind of get the result, like the thoughts that you want. Like I'm not usually going through, like let me put it this way: when you're looking at player props, right? I'm not always going through and saying like, all right, from like a bird's eye view, saying like, all right, like let me see how all these players do playing 35 minutes or more, and then what's the hit rate. Like it's not a lot of times the way that you're kind of doing it. A lot of times, especially with the minutes, you're like almost retrofitting your analysis into whatever the circumstances are. So like for the Knicks, for example, right? Like the one guy on the bench right now, because Robinson's hurt. We'll probably see a little bit of Precious Achiuwa today. I'll talk about that. But like Miles McBride played 10 minutes. He's kind of been, his minutes have been a little bit more limited over the past couple of games. Between game 6 against the Sixers and then, in game 1 against the Indiana Pacers, he played 10 minutes. My hesitation with a guy like him, and like when you look at this, it's like, all right, like he was kind of played off in game 6 because he couldn't make a shot. He just could not buy a bucket. And Maxey kind of laid into him pretty good, right? Then in game 1, you don't really see him play. And that's in large part because the Knicks played like a super tight rotation. But a guy like him, and the difference about the playoffs is like it's hard to say like, all right, well, just because a guy played 10 minutes one game, that they're not going to dramatically change the rotation. He's going to play like 30 the next game. Like there's certain guys that are going to be pretty secure. Like Hartenstein is much more secure now that Mitchell Robinson isn't available because of the injury. But other guys like McBride, like if DiVincenzo's having a bad game, then McBride might come in because they're going to be like, all right, can we catch lightning in a bottle? If McBride's one of those guys, like if he makes 2 threes right away, Tibbs is going to be like, oh, nope, he's feeling it today. We're going to keep him in. And then maybe it cuts into DiVincenzo's minutes. So like when you're using some of the data here about like minutes that they played or hit rate, like it's a lot harder to project in the playoffs strictly because of the fact that like teams are so much quicker to making their rotations, making their decisions, pulling people off the court, and like exploiting matchups. So like the Knicks, I know the most about the Knicks. I watch the Knicks the most. And like when we watched this game against the Indiana Pacers, game 1. So this is kind of like a good segue to get into game 1, right? One of the things that you notice when you're watching these games is just how like quickly the teams get to their adjustments, right? So when the Knicks put in Precious Achiuwa, they like were immediately there was immediately like a mismatch, right? Where Ben Shepherd was in, and that's not a great matchup. Like that's the alignment. It was supposed to be like Precious Achiuwa on Ben Shepherd. Not a great scenario for Precious Achiuwa defensively. And the Pacers ran multiple actions like in a row, like consecutively for Ben Shepherd to get him open shots, and he was able to score. In the regular season, you don't really see that. Like you're not seeing teams like break out of and deviate from their traditional offense. They're going to run their plays. They're going to run their sets. They're not going to be looking to like press you immediately in just a regular season game. In the playoffs, it's completely different. Like this is game plan. This is drawn up, and they're like, hey, if this is the lineup that we get and this is the personnel that we have out there, we are going to spam this until they can either show that they can stop it or until they sub the guy out. And you see that way more in the playoffs, especially compared to the regular season. Maybe you'll see it in like an important game, like if there's a game that they like need to win for standings or for seedings or something like that. Maybe you'll see that a little bit more, but you're not really seeing it otherwise. So what happens is like you get these guys like in game 1, you'll see things happen, right? And in game 1, one of the things that was notable was the Pacers and the Knicks both like really refused to send help on to Halliburton and to Brunson respectively, right? And the reason that's important is that like for the Pacers defending Brunson, it's almost like there was like a decision that's being made and they're just like we get it, like he's cooking, he's playing amazing basketball, he's been incredible, but like do we just want to live with Brunson twos? And like it's hard to say like that that's not a good idea. Like the offensive process for the Knicks is like it really a lot of it has to run through Brunson. And if you're saying like, well, we don't want to give these other guys good looks, like we don't want to give OG easy layups, we don't want to give Josh Hart easy layups, we don't want to give like those little floaters to Isaiah Hartenstein, we don't want to give up open threes to DiVincenzo. Like, what are we going to limit? What are we going to give? And for them, they might just say like, look, these shots that Brunson is making they're low expected value shots. They're like jumpers in the key. They're all shots, within 2-point range. He's not really taking a ton of threes. He doesn't have like the same explosive burst to get to the rack. And a lot of these shots are like floaters, mid range, whatever. Like those are shots that traditionally you want to give up. But we saw it like last year in the playoffs where when Booker and Durant were cooking, it was like, holy God, what do you do to stop this, right? And you wonder, is that like a little bit of what's going on with Brunson? Like the Nuggets didn't do anything super differently to get them out of their rhythm, but just the fact that they're just like, I don't think you can sustain it. And I wonder, like after one game, if that's something that Indiana is going to still say, and they're going to be like, look, like we don't think that you can sustain it. Because when you looked at the only thing that they basically said, like, we're not going to let you do, Indiana basically was like, we're not going to let you switch onto Tyrese Halliburton. They just refused to do that. And what I think that was really important, right? And that was something that they were showing, because the Pacers, they don't double really. They only put 2 on the ball in like the last minute of the game, and that was in large part to prevent Brunson from receiving the inbounds pass, because they didn't want the good ball handler to have the ball to potentially get fouled. He's a good free throw shooter. They were trying to avoid that situation. So it was even a little bit different than like saying like, we're going to put 2 on ball and deny you earlier in the game. I honestly don't think Indiana would be able to do that for an entire game. It's a little bit too strenuous, and it leaves too many other guys open that can do like just enough, and that they're unselfish. So like they're not going to really take those bad shots. The other thing is, the only action that they didn't really want was Brunson attacking Halliburton. Nembhard was lined up against Brunson as the initial defender on most possessions. And although like the other guy, like the guy that they put on like Giannis, they put on, some of these other like bigger players, like they put him on LeBron, etc. It's like Aaron Nesmith, right? And the thing that I thought was interesting was that when you're watching the tape, Brunson was actively putting Nesmith into the action. And that was a little surprising to me. They were like, he like wanted that matchup. He was switching on to get that matchup. Like he was trying to generate the switch, because Indiana doesn't want to send doubles. They don't want to set hedge really. And they were giving that switch, but I thought that was interesting, because you would think that Nembhard would be a little bit of a better like option for him. So I think that Indiana doesn't really have a great one-on-one solution to him. So they really have to make a decision. It's like, well, are we going to just live with him making these shots? I do think it was interesting though, because they, like I said before, they basically refused to let Halliburton be put into action. And I thought that was super interesting, because the Knicks were trying to attack that. And what happened was, when they were trying to attack that and the Pacers were refusing to give that up, it was skewing the Pacers defense. And like, you have to have Halliburton on the floor for like his offensive creation, his offensive gravity, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. But because of the refusal to switch Halliburton and like to surrender that switch, it was basically putting Brunson's man out of position. Like he had him on his hip on a ton of possessions, where they were trying to get onto Halliburton. The Pacers weren't conceding the switch to Halliburton, but then as a result, because of the way the screen was, you have Brunson's defender, whether it's Nembhard, Nesmith, whatever, like basically behind him. And then that's when Brunson's able to like really control you, manipulate you, get into the paint, get into the teeth of the defense. And whether he's going to get you for a foul, or whether he's going to be able to then find and kick to somebody else, because the rest of the defense is kind of scrambling a little bit to make up for the deficiency and like the way that Indiana's defense kind of had to shift. Those are all things they can kind of get to. The one thing I will say is, despite all of that, Brunson's assists just aren't really that good in this game or in this series because Indiana wants to stay home. We haven't seen anything that shows that Indiana wants to send doubles. And if they don't want to send doubles, like they were doing it like a little bit, like it was, but it was like soft and it was late. And it was Neesmith again. It was like they had Nemhard on Brunson, and then Neesmith would like kind of show a little bit of a double, but it was soft. Like he wasn't coming in hard. And if Indiana wants to make that effective, they need to do it a little bit crisper. It needs to be faster. It needs to be harder. The problem is that Brunson still is a pretty good facilitator. He's not. I don't think that he is like of the same ilk as even a Halliburton, right? In terms of passing and facilitating the basketball, he is a little bit more of a like a maestro. Like I described him as a master sculptor, and he's just carving through the defense, like with jabs in and out, short movements. He's manipulating people. And he's doing that all in like a pursuit of the hoop. And that opens up passing, but it's not necessarily the same as like when they throw doubles at him. So it's just, I think it's going to be an interesting question to see whether or not Indiana decides they want to do that. And then even if they do that, is it something that they can live with the results? Because Brunson has been very effective with like running like kind of a 2 or 3 man game with like Hartenstein and then either Josh Hart or OG Anunoby or Dante DiVincenzo, right? And what you see is like you see these like high pick and rolls where Brunson is able to get like the swing to Hartenstein on the roll. And then Hartenstein is such a good offensive facilitator that he's able to kick it out and he's able to find the open man, whether it's DiVincenzo, OG, or Hart. And sometimes it's Hart slashing or OG slashing. Other times it's DiVincenzo on the wing. And then DiVincenzo is also a good secondary or tertiary facilitator and is able to sometimes kick it one more time or kick it back to Brunson. And like that's how the offense has kind of been moving. Indiana's defense has been better over the course of the playoffs. It's been better over the back end of the season, but there are a little bit of concerns in my mind with what they are able to do because a lot of it's been, like they kind of tightened up effort wise. And that's something that the Knicks always kind of get dinged for. They're like, well, the Knicks always run at like a high effort. The problem is it's like the same problem that the Knicks oftentimes their criticism is. And it's just that like, how much more can you really turn it up during the playoffs? So I think that's all kind of things that I'm looking for on the New York side of the ball. The other thing is when we look at this game, right? Indiana like crushed in a couple different things. They were excellent off of Knicks makes. And one of the things that they were doing is the Knicks were making the basket and they were kind of slogging to get back, pushing. Indiana's pushing the pace like immediately. And they're able to get like a couple easy layups just because like Halliburton is getting the inbound pass and he's sending it 40 feet down the court. And you're getting somebody in the paint and the defense is scrambled, the defense isn't adjusted, the defense isn't set up. And those are all things that I think kind of come through in film. And it's a little bit harder to replicate after one game. I think that those are things that the Knicks can kind of tighten up a bit. The other concern for Indiana, and this is really what my biggest concern is that, and you all know, like I'm a huge Halliburton fan. Halliburton is just not looking to score. He was 2 of 6 from the field. 5 of those shots are coming from 3-point range. Like you can facilitate the offense. Like you can be like a Rondo, right? And you can facilitate the offense. You can not shoot the ball. But the problem is that like those teams were constructed differently. Halliburton and like what was making him so good at the beginning part of the season before the All-Star break. And like there's a lot of discourse that I don't love about like his injury and they're like, all right, like is he just not him? Like whatever. Like when you're playing on a hamstring injury, your body just is not, it's just not the same. Like you, and even when you do quote unquote recover, it's not the same as like when you've had a ton of time to rest, when it is 100%, because you can be recovered and it's 80%. And like, you're not putting a number on it, but it does cause you to have like some difficulties getting into rhythm, getting up to speed, getting that same burst, all that stuff. Right. So you're dealing with that issue. Then Halliburton's also dealing with the back issue. So we're seeing him like not want to be a scorer, and he's able to facilitate, sure, but I think that like there's a little bit of a lack of gravity, because the Knicks are basically saying like, well, we're not going to blitz you and we're not going to double you, we're going to play you one-on-one. And what it's allowing the Knicks to do is it's allowing them to play single coverage. It's allowing them to stay home on a bunch of other guys. And they still make mistakes. Like, it's going to happen. Halliburton's a great facilitator. He's a great floor general. He's great at manipulating a defense. But it is limiting his efficacy as a lead facilitator. He had 8 assists on 15 potentials, and that's a big difference from the 10.9 assists and 17.8 potentials he averaged during the regular season. So because he's not really been able to take advantage of the Knicks single coverage off the bounce, it's giving the Knicks a lot a stronger foothold defensively when they're trying to defend him. There's no real concern that all right, hey, he's dribbling into the paint. We need to be worried about the fact he's going to take a layup. There's nothing to worry about. You stay home on your guys outside on the perimeter. You don't need to collapse on the driver. You don't need to collapse on him because he's not shooting the basketball. So, if you kind of look at it that way, it makes it, I think it becomes much more difficult for Indiana moving forward in this game and in the series. So when you look at game 1, there's a miscall for sure. They should not have called that kickball. At the same time, the illegal screen was an illegal screen. If you don't want to, I get it. It's you can't call it. You can't do this. I'm a Knicks fan, whatever. They just called one 2 minutes before that against DiVincenzo. So it's just kind of one of those things, just we can point to this, we can look at that. There's so many other factors that go into whether or not you win or lose a game. Now, looking at game 1, the thing that was crazy was the Knicks had 8 offensive rebounds and they were outscored in the paint. That's not exactly a common occurrence for the New York Knicks. The difference is in the second half, the Knicks won the second half 72-62. They were playing with pace. And that was, I think, important because Indiana has demonstrated, they've said we want to play with pace. The one thing, obviously, the Knicks shot incredibly well from 3-point range. So that's a downturn, or that's a detractor from what the Knicks are going to be able to do and what they're going to be able to replicate. But if you're Indiana and you look at this game and you go, we limited them on the offensive glass. It was a 7-8 offensive rebound type of scenario. The Knicks did not have a huge edge in rebounding, and we outscored them in the paint. That's a game that you want to win. That's a game you have to win. So a game where the Knicks turn the ball over 15 times. That's a game you have to win. Those are some things I understand that the Knicks shot incredibly from 3-point range. Turnovers, Knicks are not really a team that's flipping with the basketball. They're generally going to win the offensive rebounding battle with a much more significant margin. And they're not usually going to get outscored in the paint like that. So I think when you kind of assess that and you look at it from the whole, Indiana, I think, was a little fortunate Indiana was was unfortunate that they lost that game. The Knicks were fortunate to have won that game. That was a game that if you looked at the box score, you'd say Indiana probably should have won. They didn't. You only get so many of those games in a series. And I understand that sometimes the calls can kind of swing, but I do think that this sets up well for New York. And I think it sets up well for them tonight as well. So I like the Knicks on the money line. I like the Knicks -4.5. I know that the line has moved a little bit against them. I'm not super surprised. Indiana did play well, I think, in game 1. But I think that New York has just shown – New York has a little bit more counters. I think there's more things that they can tighten up, more things that they can improve moving forward in this game to kind of limit what Indiana is able to do, and they can build off that strong second half. A couple props that I'm looking at, though. I like Brunson's points props 37.5. That is the craziest thing. Second highest line on any player prop the entire season for a point slot. It's honestly, he keeps going over it. He's going over that in 5 straight games. It's ridiculous. Indiana doesn't really have good answers for him. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that he could exceed that, but I think the better way to play it is you can grab Brunson 30 plus and Knicks money line at -130. it's probably hard to envision a scenario where he doesn't score 30 and the team is able to win. So that's why I don't mind that. And you can also grab like Knicks -4.5. The other play that I'm looking at in this game is Miles Turner over 17.5 points. He's continued to look great here. He's got that combination of size and shooting ability that he can bring to the table. And I think that the Knicks are pretty comfortable living with the results of Turner, finding open looks as long as they can stay home on both Halliburton and Siakam. So Turner's been a little streaky. Like he's always like a little bit of a streaky kind of player, but in 4 games this season, he's been solid with 28, 5, 23, and 23 points in this matchup. The one game he had just 5 points, he only played 24 minutes. So in game one, like I kind of said, the Knicks allowed Turner to slip by them in rolls, and occasionally, he would get lost in the defense, whether it was on the perimeter, if Halliburton was able to drag multiple defenders into the action. And the thing is, Turner was also able to punish the Knicks from the interior and from the exterior of the defense of the floor. He hit the Knicks when the Knicks were playing drop, and he was also excellent as a roller when the Knicks were playing a little bit closer to the level. So I think that his ability to really hit the Knicks in a multitude of different ways is great for him. I like him to go over the 17.5 points once again in this contest. So that's it for the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers. It shouldn't come as a huge surprise that I like the Knicks in this series, especially after having won game one. But we'll kind of see how the series plays out. I'm hoping this is a short series. It wouldn't surprise me, obviously, if Indiana is able to pull out a couple wins here. But I think at the end of the day, New York is going to be able to carry this. I don't think that Indiana has a great answer for Jalen Brunson. Now, looking at the next series, the Celtics and the Cavs, I'm going to save a lot of time on this one. I genuinely do not know how the Cavs are going to score enough points against the Celtics. Cavs offense was just kind of mid, like all season, like just not very good. Nothing to write home about. And when you look at the offensive rating they were able to put up, 102.2. They allowed 130.4 defensive rating or offensive rating to the Boston Celtics. When you look at this game, Cleveland did this. They didn't even really turn the ball over. And like I know that they were missing Jared Allen. The thing about missing Jared Allen is I think that helps the offense overall, like in terms of the process. They held up with Boston in terms of taking threes, but they couldn't convert. Cleveland took 43% of their shots from three. They were only able to make 28.2%. And that was kind of an issue that they were having playing against the Orlando Magic as well. Like their guys were not able to really capitalize on those 3-point opportunities. Cleveland can win some games if they stick to this kind of program where they just chuck a bunch of threes. And they were able to kind of keep it close maybe that way just due to variance. But that's not really Cleveland's MO. Cleveland doesn't take a lot of threes like that. That's just not the style that they play. The one time that they did do that was when Mobley was out, Allen was in, and Garland was out. It was just really Donovan Mitchell. And they did run like a little bit more of a 5-out type of offense where Mobley was even shooting some threes. That's not something that Cleveland wants to do. It's not like what they do. We've seen it. I think it works. I think it's a good form of their offense, and they just they just don't do it. They aren't doing it. So I really do struggle to see how Cleveland is going to score enough in the series. Donovan Mitchell can score as many points as he wants, and I don't know if it's really going to matter at all. When you look at what happened in this game, Boston and Cleveland were both pretty bad in transition, but Boston just crushed in the half court. And Cleveland didn't really have an answer. And that's concerning for them, considering the fact that Kristaps Porzingis was out. You were seeing like heavy minutes from Luke Cornett. Al Horford obviously played a ton of minutes, and they weren't able to really capitalize on those opportunities. Like Mobley's hands looked terrible. And, if Mobley's not going to put up points either and kind of stress the interior where you've got like a 37, 38-year-old Al Horford, you're not going to be in a good situation where, they can, where Boston's maybe not going to be able to close out on your guys in the perimeter the same way. There's no like internal gravity there. So this is really going to all shoulder on Donovan Mitchell. And there's really only so much you can do. 37 minutes, 33 points, 6 boards, 5 assists roughly 50% shooting. He almost had a 40% usage rate. Nobody else had 20 points. Mobley had 17, Garland had 14, Okoro had 11. That's it in terms of double-digit points. Strus was terrible. Levert couldn't get anything going. Merrill couldn't score. He was 0 for 5 from the field, 0 for 4 from 3. You saw Tristan Thompson minutes. That's not a great scenario. So I think this is a really bad series for the Cavs. I'm not going to dwell on it too long. The one thing I will say is that Tatum has been great in terms of rebounding the basketball. For Tatum in this matchup, right? He has exceeded his line is 8.5 rebounds. He's gone over this in 6 straight games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He had 11 rebounds in game 1. And when we look at what his rebound chances were, the number is actually going to be a little bit lower. Let's see if they don't even have it up yet. Either way, the one thing about Tatum is, and we've talked about this before, he gets a lot of weak side rebounds that are relatively uncontested. The team just kind of lets him get those. It's good for the offense. He kind of gets the offense rolling. So that's definitely a look for him. And without Porzingis there, generally you would see you could see some of those rebounds getting consumed by guys like Cornette or Horford, who they're not trying to stat pad or anything like that, but they're just generally a little bit closer to the rim, as opposed to Porzingis can defend a little bit further out. So that's one thing to be a little bit leery of. But the 8.5, he's gone over it 6 straight games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's definitely a look for you to kind of take right here and kind of moving forward. I also don't hate a look if they ever open it on Tatum rebounding leader for the series. The reason I say that is Mobley started off really hot. Mobley's had 13 in game 1. When Jared Allen comes back, I would imagine he's coming back at some point during the series. Maybe not, but we'll just kind of have to see. But if he does come back, I'd be wanting Tatum, a rebounds leader, because Allen's going to cut into Mobley, and this is a raw total. So, Tatum's going to be able to kind of attack the glass in the same type of way. And I think that could be problematic for Mobley in terms of retaining a lead here, because he's going to get cut into by Jared Allen, his own teammate. So that's an angle that I would be looking at in this series moving forward. But other than that, I'd be surprised if this is not a 4 or 5 game series. Boston kind of fucks around, so maybe a 5 game series, but I would be shocked if we see 6 or 7 games. Now, let's look at the Wolves and the Nuggets. This series, crazy. Denver down 0-2. They did it with Rudy Gobert didn't even play in game 2. And really interesting series. Very physical series. And Murray doesn't look right. Murray doesn't look healthy. KCP looks a little bit dinged up. The problem is, honestly, is that Minnesota is so physical. They're so tight defensively. And if Murray's going to keep just chucking up bad shots, you're really limited in terms of what you can do offensively. Jokic can only do so much. Jokic looked a little passive in game 2. That was a game I was shocked. That to me felt like a game, like a smash spot game for him to really kind of take it to the teeth of the Minnesota Timberwolves without Rudy Gobert in there. And it just didn't really happen. So I was a little bit surprised by that. Down 0-2, going on the road, this is tough. Like when you watch Minnesota, you look at it and you're like, man, they look so good. Like they look like they're a team to beat. And it's interesting because like their shot profile, like their offensive efficiency is so much better in the playoffs than it is during the regular season. You're like, is this replicable? And you watch it and you're like, maybe. Like there's a little bit more the rotations are a little bit crisper. People seem to know their role a little bit better. And I wonder if, to a degree, like, is it because they're hungry? Is that what the situation is? Or is it that they, like right now, like they just know that there's a pecking order and they're following that? And I think that that's a lot of times that can be very important. The other thing is when you have a defense that's like nails like that, and you're really like pressing and putting the screws to your opponent, that defensive improvement can oftentimes lead to an increase in offensive efficiency. You're getting a couple more transition looks. You're maybe getting a couple easier looks. Like you can kind of build off of that intensity and get the defense or like the other team's defense reeling a little bit if you're able to kind of keep putting the screws to them. So in game 3 now, this is a spot. This is a must-win game for Denver. I don't like betting on must-win scenarios because I think that you kind of open yourself up to a level of exposure, right? When you bet on must-win scenarios, you're betting on a team that is not in an advantageous situation, and the line here is kind of indicative of that. So the line opened at -4 Minnesota. Uh, we're seeing this as high as Minnesota -5 now, and this game is on Friday night. So there's plenty of days off, and I think that that's probably the most important thing. Jamal Murray, fortunately or unfortunately for the Nuggets, did not get suspended for this game after he threw that heating pad or pack onto the court the other day. Murray's looked bad, and if he's going to continue to just keep taking these shots, it's going to be problematic for Denver. I don't really know what the solution is, though. Otherwise, like you need him to make these shots, and I don't really want to blame the injury, to be honest with you. Like maybe he's like a little bit less explosive, but at the same time, like the looks just are not going. He's not able to get open. He's not able to generate offense in the same way. And if he's unable to do that, I think there's just too much of a load that falls onto Jokic. I will say that in game 3, I will likely be looking at Jokic points. His points prop, let's see if it's up. It's a little early, but it might be up right now. In game 3, his points prop is set at 28.5. I think I'm going to take that. And the reason I'm going to take that is Gobert should be back. You know, he missed time due to the birth of his first child. So congrats to Rudy. Congrats on the sex. But it's been a little bit of a better matchup for Jokic. Like it's a tough matchup. It's one that he has to work with. But Gobert, when he's in, he's not surrendering some of those 3-man actions that the Nuggets and Jokic like to run with Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray. And the thing that was interesting, watching the film, listening to a little bit of the Low Post, what Minnesota was doing is they were disrupting Denver's offensive flow. The timing of things didn't look right. The actions weren't smooth. The actions weren't crisp. And it's like they were making Jokic think almost, which it sounds funny, but most of the time, like he doesn't have to. It just comes. And by forcing that, and by forcing some of these actions to like not be super crisp, to not be super time, like to be timed super well, you started seeing mistakes. You started seeing cracks in this Denver like offensive machine. Because when you actually look at the team, they don't have a lot of guys that can create for themselves. You have Jokic that can create for himself, and they have Jamal Murray who can create for himself. And Murray is literally just looks like he's being mugged on a daily basis by Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And when I say like, and they're doing it like lawfully, like they're not putting their hands on him. They're not really fouling him. There's maybe a little bit of contact there, but they're not calling it. It's the playoffs, and that's just the way the whistle has been, like that marginal contact. And then even it's like, oh, McDaniels is done, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's done, Anthony Edwards is picking you up, and the Wolves are picking you up at like 94 feet. So it's really stressing Murray. And as a result, it's stressing the rest of the offense because it's stressing Jokic. And when you have a bunch of guys that like are really good, but I don't even want to call it like heliocentric with Jokic, but like it kind of is, and they're not able to create their own looks, it becomes much more difficult because Minnesota knows they can play Jokic kind of straight up. They're putting either like Cat on him or they're putting, Naz Reid on him, whatever. And they're using Gobert as a floater kind of behind. Jokic can score over those guys. Like he can generate fouls. He can generate contact through Cat, through Naz Reid, whatever. But at the same time, when Gobert is in, it then is restricting some of the other actions that they like to do. So like there was like a sequence where in game 1 when Gobert played where you had like a 3-man action with Jokic, Murray, and Aaron Gordon. And Rudy Gobert was just like, I don't really care what you're doing. I am not going to give up the spacing. Like I'm in this drop, in this floater type of position. I know that somebody's covering you, Jokic. I'm sagging off of Aaron Gordon, and I'm not really worried about whatever you're doing on the perimeter, Jamal Murray. And as a result, normally that's a play where there's kind of some pick and rolls there, and then you see Gordon cut to the hoop, and you're able to get that bucket. Gobert is able to block that entire action, and that's why he's the defensive player of the year, because that's like an elevated type of thing that doesn't show up in the box score, but when you watch the game, you're like, man, like he just completely blew up this action that's been working for years for Denver. And Denver didn't really have a solution to it. And then you see Denver late in the shot clock. There's like 5 seconds left, and they're like, "Oh my god, we got to get a shot up." Untenable offensive process. So I don't know if Denver really has a great solution to that, besides like Murray being like, "Hey, be better," and then looking at Jokic and saying, "Hey, you need to score more," so that maybe they'll send some doubles. But at the same time, those are not easy looks for Jokic. It's just that they're looks that he can get. And that's why I like the over 28.5 for him. I think it's a spot that he can kind of continue to kind of cruise from. Looking at the series leader market, though, we gave out Nickeil Alexander-Walker threes leader at 30-1. He's still 25-1, and in large part that's because there's a big cluster of players that are kind of at the top. Naz Reid has 6, Karl Anthony Towns has 5, Nickeil Alexander-Walker has 5. And then for the Nuggets, Michael Porter Jr. has 5, and Justin Holiday, our guy, has 5. When I think that right now you can bet on Karl Anthony Towns and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Towns is 10-1, Alexander-Walker is 25-1. Kind of talked about this angle with both Brandon Anderson and Jim Turvey a bit. And the reason why I say this is Porter Jr. is taking 14. Naz Reid's taking 12, Alexander Walker's taking 12, Ant is taking 11. And those are the leaders in terms of volume. Nickeil Alexander Walker's going to play. The defense has been nails. He didn't really play too great in the first game in terms of his offense, but if the three ball is going to start to fall, we know that that's a look that they want to give him. And then Naz Reid, he played more minutes, but I question to see how replicable it is given the fact that Rudy Gobert is going to be back. So I think that, Towns, the volume's there. He's 5 for 9. And Towns is a great 3-point shooter. He's a great perimeter shooter. So I think the 10-1's a little bit long for a guy that we know is going to be in the rotation pretty much no matter what. And then for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he's got the second most 3-point attempts, and he's got the second most makes, one behind a teammate that I think might get his limits a little bit more limited because of the return of Rudy Gobert. So I think those are both viable options. Looking at the final series here, we have the Thunder versus the Mavericks. And this was a series I was really excited for. Luca versus Shea was something that I was really interested in. It was something that I really wanted to see. And Luca just doesn't look great. I thought that he would look better in game 1, given the fact that that was the most amount of time off that he was going to have for really the series, for the playoffs. 3 games, it just didn't look great. He started off hot, 8 points in the first quarter. Terrible after that. He's been really inefficient. The percentages aren't there, and that's something that I think is concerning for Dallas moving forward, because if you look at what they're able to maybe do or what they're able to kind of put forward, if Luka's inefficient, you start getting like kind of bogged down in the offense, right? And if he's not able to create for himself, he's like a total cone on defense right now. There's a video out there, and basically, I think he's so hurt that, the leg is bothering him so much that he just is like standing there on defense, like he's trying to poke around, but like he's just not able to really move. And Luka would never. He doesn't seem like the type of player to blame a loss on an injury, but at the same time, he just really doesn't look right. So. Pre-series, we gave out Shea 4-1 series points leader. I feel really good about that bet right now. And then looking at what Oklahoma City was doing and what Dallas can kind of do to attack that is, and part of why I think Luka started off so strongly was Oklahoma City started the game a little bit of like they were playing a little bit more of a drop. They were in a drop, and if they're going to do that, it's good for Luca. He gets a little bit more space. He can kind of manipulate the defense a little bit better than if they're playing him at the level, picking him up earlier, closer to the perimeter, not giving him as much space, kind of making him work a little bit harder. But that's a spot that Kyrie Irving just has to punish them in. If they're going to drop on Kyrie Irving, he's got to make those mid-range shots. He's got to be better. He's got to make all of them. And I think that Kyrie Irving kind of needs to be the Mavericks' leading scorer, which is tough. It's a very tough ask here, given the fact that Oklahoma City has so many wings they can throw at you. And I think that's part of what makes Josh Giddey a little bit more like unplayable, right? When we look at this game, Giddey played 17 minutes. He started and played 17 minutes. He had 2 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. For these games moving forward, it's going to be a spot to watch, right? So they're actually not even posting Giddey lines right now on DraftKings. Like you cannot bet on a Josh Giddey line. And I think, let's check FanDuel quick too. We'll see if it's up this way. So props.cash is pulling some stuff for game 2. Looks like 6.5s, 5.5s. But sometimes, let's take a look. I'm just going to pull it up on FanDuel quick. Yeah, so Josh Giddey, 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists. And for his combo prop, PRA, you can look at 17.5. I would lean under on 17.5. I think that's the kind of the way to look at it. I think you can even see if he starts and try to live bet an under. It's just not really a great matchup for him. They were able to kind of bury him a little bit better against the Pelicans. But in this matchup, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And I think that given that, we're going to see a couple more wings from Oklahoma City. And this is another thing that I was talking about with Jim and with Brandon. And one of the points that Jim brought up, and this was actually, the conversation kind of stemmed from the fact that Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein are like one player, right? Like the Knicks basically created a center with 2 players that on like relatively affordable contracts right now. When you look at Oklahoma City, they and actually Dallas has done the same thing with Gafford and PJ Washington to a degree, but he's more of a forward, and Derek Lively. And Dallas has kind of created a center with multiple players. Oklahoma City has done the same thing, except not with the center position, but with their wings. You have just so many options here, right? Like you have Shea, you have Jalen Williams, you have Kason Wallace, you have Giddey out there, you have Dort. You've got Shea, obviously. They have so many wings that are malleable, and they can each kind of do a little bit of the same stuff, but they also have like slightly unique skill set, and you can play more of them at the same time. Oklahoma City's depth at the wing position is giving them the ability to kind of make adjustments, kind of make edits to their rotations, to their roster that seem like slight, but it stresses what Dallas is able to do. Dallas basically has like 6-7 guys that they can run, period. Oklahoma City, Dagnall's running like 10 deep. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're kind of prodding. He's kind of seeing like, do I need to cut down to my like 6 or 7 man rotation? Maybe not, because we've been kind of in control. We've won all 5 of our games so far. Also, I think maybe it's a young team. I don't want to dishearten anybody. Let's continue to play everybody, even if it's only a couple minutes. Like they're still getting on the floor. It's not a DMP. Those are all kind of important things morale-wise. I wonder if some of all of those things are factors. But what it is allowing them to do is it does allow them to say like, well, this is our adjustment. Like we'll start Giddey, sure, but like he's not going to play more than maybe like the start of the first quarter, and then maybe a little bit in the second, maybe the start of halftime. But then after that, like he's not seeing the court in the fourth quarter. So those are all little things that I'm watching for Oklahoma City, and I think I gave Dallas too much credit in the series. I thought Oklahoma City was going to win in like 7. Watching game 1, I'm not confident in this series going that long. Um, and I know that I don't like to overreact to things. I try not to overreact to results, but Dallas turned the ball over 18.4% of the time. That was a turnover percentage, which is you should maybe regulate, but Luca turns the ball over a lot generally. Effective field goal possession percentage was bad, 47.4% compared to Oklahoma City's 54.9%. Um, the other thing is Luca. You need Luca to score, and he's inefficient right now because I think in large part because of the injury. And as a result, Dallas scored 76.1 points per possession in the half court in game 1. That is bad. That is horrible. Especially when they're stuck in the half court on 85% of their possessions. Untenable situation. Obviously, a lot of this comes down to Luca, but like if he's not 100%, I really struggle to see how they're going to win this series, let alone keep it kind of competitive. So I think it's a good position to be in if you have an Oklahoma City ticket. Um, I think that Oklahoma City is set up pretty well to at least be rested for the conference finals. But right now, looking at this, the best teams the teams that I expect to win right now, Oklahoma City looks great. The Knicks look really good. The Timberwolves look incredible. And obviously, like you don't want to discount the champs just based on the fact that they have a guy like Jokic, but it's a tough road for them. They got to go win 4 out of 5, and they've lost home court significantly, losing both games at home already. And then Boston's just going to roll over Cleveland. So I think the most likely scenario in the finals right now is Boston, Minnesota. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I don't think that Oklahoma City has like a great answer for what Minnesota is able to do from a size comparison on the court. I think that and like what Shea and like where Shea kind of likes to score on the interior, we're seeing obviously Jamal Murray is not Shea, but we're seeing like just the level of attention and how much they're disrupting Jamal Murray. I think that there could be some carryover into a matchup against Shea, as good as Shea is. So that's kind of where I am right now in terms of the playoffs. One other play that I liked was Isaiah Hartenstein over 8.4 rebounds per game for the rest of the series. He only had, or for the series as a whole, he only had 6 in game 1, but with no Mitchell Robinson, uh, you know, the floor is higher there. There's a little bit more opportunity there. And against a team like Indiana, he could always rack up like 15 boards in one game. It just kind of depends on what they do with their rotations with like Isaiah Jackson, that type of thing. So but I do like the 8.5 or 8.4. And I think, if you wanted to sprinkle rebounds leader now, you can get 20-1. I feel a little bit more confident in that, given the fact that Robinson is not going to be playing. He's not in the rotation, obviously due to the injury. So just a real quick pods and recs. The one thing that I'm going to recommend, I have so I have my Nespresso. Obviously, I got a new one because I need to get a new one. But they have like the tall coffees. They're awesome. Like I love having a tall coffee. There's nothing more like I really don't like. I think that was my problem with like the Keurig and the Nespressos for a bit was that the coffee size just wasn't big enough. Like you're getting that like 8-ounce coffee. I'm like I need 5 of these. But if you get like a 14-ouncer, then it's like all right, like we're feeling a little bit better here. Maybe I can stay awake. Maybe I can stay alive through the night. So that was definitely something. And the other thing that I wanted to recommend was electric vehicles. I got a new car. It's sick. I love plugging it in. I think I'm obsessed with it. It was a nice little tax credit. So I I do think that it's nice to have that type of fuel utility there. It's a lot of fun. I love plugging it in. I'm addicted to it. I'm assuming it's cheaper. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm assuming it's cheaper, and it's a lot of fun there. So I got that, and then the final thing that I wanted to recommend was I've been a big fan of doing like salads and wraps. It's like I had like a chicken Caesar salad or chicken Caesar wrap. Dynamite. Got to throw the croutons in the wrap though. Big upgrade to me. So big fan of that. And you know, if you have if you have that, it's like it kind of makes you feel like you're being healthy, even though like like you're not really being that healthy. But like most people, you're putting lettuce in a wrap anyway. But there's something about the chicken Caesar wrap in particular that just kind of hits home. So big fan of that, and would just continue to keep pushing that. Also, don't forget to get your Mother's Day cards, whether it's for your wife, your significant other, your baby mother, your mom, your grandma, like whoever you need, whatever moms are in your life. Get those Mother's Day cards. Get them a little something, whether it's flowers, whatever. And just don't forget because that's this weekend. And considering all of that, considering what we got going on in the playoffs, don't forget to subscribe to Cash That. And don't forget to subscribe to Props.Cash. This episode is brought to you by our good friends at Props.Cash. Those red charts, those green charts, you can get that all for 25% off your first month with code Dellera25 as we wrap up the NBA playoffs and we move towards WNBA, we move towards MLB season. You can get all of those sports all for the same monthly price, and you can get that for 25% off your first month with code Dellera25. So keep all that in mind. Make sure you get those gifts, and let's continue to cash that.